Keep in touch with the Wolf Connection podcast on our Instagram handle at the Wolf Connection Pod, or email us your questions, comments, and guest ideas to podcast@wolfconnection.org. Thank you for your support, and howls to you all. Welcome to the Wolf Connection podcast. I'm your host, John Kalfin. So this is our culmination of this series talking about the Wyoming Wolf Incident that involved Cody Roberts, involved what we now know is a less than a yearling wolf that was ultimately run over by a snowmobile by Cody, injured, tortured, paraded around a bar, and then ultimately killed in the back of that bar in Daniel, Wyoming. And really, the individual who has been writing these articles, if you do not follow WyoFile, please do so. If you don't follow this incredible journalist who talks about Wyoming's wildlife, their natural resources, he's also an investigative reporter, Mike Kosmrl. Please follow him also. He's done an incredible job. Mike, it's good to see you again. Obviously, the circumstances a little bit difficult here, but again, great to get your insight. How are you doing?
I'm good, John. Thanks for having me on to discuss WyoFile and our reporting.
Yeah, absolutely. I think just for everyone who's listening, because this is the bookend or the cap to these 4 episodes, and glad that we're doing it on the week of the commissioner meeting, which is happening. Just give everybody where the story stands at this moment, because you've been very good at, it seems like every 2 or 3 days, there's a little bit more to the story, a little bit more gets released, more videos and photos. So anybody who's listening that has been following this and they've been following our episodes, currently, where does this story stand, or what's the newest thing that people would need to know about this Cody Roberts incident that has been released, I guess, in the last 2 to 3 days that maybe you have talked about?
Yeah, for me, the most recent story I wrote and reported was really kind of about like what it was like at the bar that night, February 29th, and the way. So I think, as you guys know, the Wyoming Game and Fish Department, citing the state statute, has been pretty sparse on details. And I mean, to be fair, we don't know the depths of the investigation. We don't know even kind of how much info they compiled. So we don't know like what's necessarily being withheld, because we just don't know what info there is. And so in the absence of that, obviously there's this like international interest in what happened. And it's tough as a journalist verifying the facts. A lot of the narrative around this incident for the first couple weeks came from anonymous sources, not eyewitnesses, but anonymous sources who knew of the situation that happened, that the Cowboy State Daily published details based on these anonymous sources who said they knew what happened. And so we had and continue to have a real appetite for just learning the verified facts of what it was like in that bar and what happened, and how was the wolf treated, how did the bar handle the situation, how did the patrons of the bar handle the situation. And so we had a breakthrough on that front late last week, and were able to get in touch with someone who was there. In fact, it was the person who reported it to the Wyoming Game and Fish Department. And given the kind of incredible sensitivity to this issue, given Sublette County is a really small community, we granted that person anonymity. And I was able to sit down with that person for a pretty long interview and got just the perspective of this individual. And so that story's up on WyoFile.com. I can't recall the exact title off the top of my head, but it has eyewitness in the title. Yeah, I mean, it really is just about what I said. It's about just, what it was like at the bar that night, and what we learned through the eyes of this eyewitness, someone who was there.
And what about just some of the basic logistics, which I guess now thinking of it, we haven't really gotten into, like when the initial snowmobile incident took place, the gap between that and kind of when he actually brought it to the bar, how long they were at the bar, any kind of timeline?
Don't know. So no, he was being kind of like coy and kind of just like joking about the whole situation. He didn't tell people at the bar even, or at least he didn't tell the individual that I got a hold of, who did converse with Cody Roberts, uh, how he even got the wolf. The one a detail that did not make it into the story was that Cody Roberts' wife was at the bar prior to Cody and told the story of, uh, with people listening, of getting home, and in the way that the story was retold to me, she was kind of like yelling about how, she showed up at her house and there was a fucking wolf with tape wrapped around its face. It's not in her kitchen. So that was, some time before, but no, I don't have any hours or details. Um, I did not get that from this person.
What has it been like for you working on this type of a story? Because we've spoken before and we've seen the work that you've done. Does this strike a different nerve for you, for those at WyoFile? Is this something that you guys, I don't want to say are prepared for, but is this something on another level that you've seen as a journalist that has, as you said, has created national attention for one, international attention as well, and coming into this small county in Wyoming and really shining the spotlight on an incident like this?
Yeah, I can speak to that on kind of multiple fronts. For one, just like the magnitude of the story has demanded so much of my attention since I was on when I learned about this incident. I was on a vacation. I was visiting my brother in South Korea, probably 5 days into a 2-week trip, and I'll be honest, like I don't think a single day went by where I didn't think about that situation. And it's like, damn, like and it had there was no publicity on it for those 10 days. I learned about it from Emily and Emily Cohen with KHOL. And um, got back, and to be honest, I had a big story that I'd been working on for months, planned, and I'd even set aside days in our editorial calendar to work on this other story. And I just like had to turn to the Wolf incident. And even so, I like called my editor almost right away. And I'm like super jet lagged and was like, hey, I have to. And this is after the KHOL published the first story, but I just knew that there was so much more that to dig at. And so yeah, told my editor, like, I really want to look into this and bump the other story. And then like, fast forward 2 weeks, and the only thing I've published about has been this wolf situation for 2 weeks, which is really unusual. I mean, highly unusual. Yeah. I like the last time I remember writing like two consecutive stories about the exact same thing that like weren't like a package together, it was like the Yellowstone flooding in 2022. That would have been like historic Yellowstone flooding, you know, like there's just very few incidents that, like there's an incident in 2018 where like a hunting outfitter was killed by a grizzly bear, and there's just like incredible appetite and interest shared by myself in like what the hell happened. And I'd say, like another situation that happened in this neck of the woods that falls into that category would be like the Gabby Petito thing. Do you remember Gabby Petito? She was the kind of like influencer whose boyfriend killed her. She was found like right off to the side of Grand Teton National Park. Same like intense level of like kind of like national interest, clear as day. And And yeah, the wolf story, like clearly pretty quick, like you could tell it was like in that camp where there's just like so much interest. And and then it was like complicated by the fact that like there's so little official information. And so like, you want to be able to tell the story accurately and like provide the whole picture. And it's like just awfully hard to do when you can't get it from authorities who's, made the argument that they're bound by this state statute and they couldn't give it out. Um, and so, yeah, and I've had discussions with my editors about just today I did about, how I've written five straight stories and it feels almost like I'm like taking advantage of the situation, and like there've been people that have criticized us for it. I'm very like cognizant of that. Um, but at the end of the day, every story that we published, I feel like there was like important new information that came out, and it was it's what everyone's talking about, and it just felt like that was the right editorial decision, and so that's why it's been such a focal point for me in WyoFile from my perspective.
What do you think, as a journalist who's written a plethora of different kinds of stories, what do you think it is about this particular story that is causing that sort of explosive engagement?
Yeah, like I'll just go with my own like gut instinct when I learned about it. And it was unverified, it was a rumor that was being conveyed to me by another journalist at that time. But when I learned of the incident, I just was completely struck by like the sheer cruelty of the situation. Like that's what I couldn't get my head past, and that's frankly why I thought it was such a great story and a story that needed to get out there. Because at that time it was not, because it was just appalling, quite honestly. If that indeed was what happened, and we've learned that is what happened. So I think that that is one component of it. Just like the simple facts of the incident are really gruesome and hard to hear. And I know a lot of people, they're not watching these videos and they don't even like to look at the photos, because, it's a dying animal that is like being like paraded around so some guy can get some laughs. It's pretty disgusting, I think, objectively by almost everybody's perspective. And like, that irregardless of whether that person is big game hunter or an animal rights activist or just like the super market clerk, like people pretty universally are just kind of repulsed by that behavior. And so I think that really struck people. Certainly the fact that it's a wolf, it's an iconic species, with this, historic animosity from government and states like Wyoming and want wolves. That certainly probably is a layer to it. I think like there's just like some like little nuanced details to it too that have really caught people. Like this incident has put a spotlight on just this whole subculture in the hunting world where it's a normal thing to run over animals with snowmobiles, which is, completely like outrageous to 99% of people. But, there's a real little subset of the hunting community here that is a thing. And so I think when like the broader public learns of that, they're like understandably concerned and are very interested. And so, yeah, I just think that all those details combined have like made this into the story that it has been.
Yeah. From your from your perspective too, Mike, as you said, you were on vacation when you learned about this. Speak to the gravity of that situation, because you touched on it just briefly there before about the subculture inside of the hunting culture there, but also if I want to just zoom out for just a second, because like you said, you learned about it through a rumor, through someone that, whatever, and you were talking. And again, thanks for Emily Cohen for breaking this story, just starting the floodgate for everyone to know about what's going on. But what does it say to like you said, the informational integrity of these departments in the state for not releasing the information, whatever those reasons may be. And obviously maybe they're still, like you said, they may be doing a bigger investigation, but the information was not put out there initially. And now as we continue to go down this road, the culture that has already been set inside of the state has said that these actions are okay anyway. They are legal. Like there is no charge for someone running down any animal for that matter, whether it's a wolf or whatever it may be. What does it speak to when people look at this from the outside in? Because now they're really getting to see, and this is not all individuals from Wyoming. I want to make that very, very clear. But what does it look like from, like I say, journalistic perspective, that the information is not readily available, and that now these actions and these laws that are in place are now being put to the forefront for the state, for Wyoming, for the state, and for these game and fish department, and for everyone around there?
Yeah. Like with like the law, so like the law underpinning like why it's legal to run over coyotes and wolves with snowmobiles, wolves in most of the state, not everywhere, is it's just like how Wyoming manages predators, right? So there aren't any restrictions. So that like explains it. And there's just not, like I'm sure there's pretty gruesome stuff that happened to predator species all the time. And I think that this incident just like shined a light on that stuff happens. And it's like really, front and center. And so like if I think it could have been a different incident that went viral, and it would have it would have like had that same kind of effect of illuminating these very permissive laws. Aside from that, I've covered like wildlife in Wyoming for coming up on a dozen years, and I've this hasn't always been the case, but like I feel like for quite a long time I've had like a very good relationship with the Wyoming Game and Fish Department, and work with them all the time on sensitive stories, hard things, things that they probably don't necessarily aren't proud to be out there. But nevertheless, I've had a very successful communicative relationship, and I'll be honest, like it broke down when this all hit the fan. I was getting no responses from anybody for like over a week, and gave up, and I wanted some clarity on why the state. I mean, I want clarity on a lot of things. I wanted to understand why wasn't there a press release about this? Like what was the regional, like what was the extent of the communication about it when it happened? Like we don't know that. We don't know if the director of the Wyoming Game and Fish Department even knew about it. Honestly, we don't. And we don't know if maybe they did know about it. And maybe there was a discussion about, well, should we get ahead of this and should we put out a press release? Maybe they decided, no, let's in essence, sweep it under the rug. Let's pretend it happened and not put it out there. And there are ways that we can tell those stories. And we can tell those stories by putting in records requests and trying to figure out, what was said, how are these decisions made? And we anticipate doing that and putting records requests in to understand kind of like the anatomy of a public relations crisis for this state agency. And like, I'll just be honest, like those, like asking for texts and all that is like, it's straining on these relationships. Like these are professional relationships with people I respect and value. And it's hard to, like ask for their text messages. I'm sure they don't like it, but I'm going to. And so it's been challenging. Just in the absence of information, like you're just kind of grasping, right? Like, and I felt, quite frankly, like I've been like left with little recourse other than just submitting a bunch of records requests because I'm not able to get interviews with people. And I'm not able to talk to the warden who investigated this. And I'm not able to talk to the regional supervisor who might have okayed that warden's decisions. And like all that has been off limits so far. And maybe that'll change. I really hope it does. But in the meantime, it's as a journalist, I understand that the agency personnel very well might listen to this recording, and it's tough to talk about, but it's been really hard. It's been tough. And I understand from their perspective on some level, that this is a really tough one, and they're getting inundated and they're getting death threats. And I understand, like, they want to have the information buttoned up and they want their messaging to be like very aligned. They don't want one person saying one thing, someone else saying another thing. But at the same time, in I think that they've, in their desire to control the message on this one, it combined with the state statute that they believe limits what they can say about what happened. There's just been an absence of information until they partially fulfilled records requests last week and then sent out kind of like a redacted one-page document and then some video feed from the bar. But until that, there had been essentially zero information other than one 6-sentence press release that had nothing in it.
I can't believe how quickly death threats just become a thing that gets thrown out there. It's crazy how often they're just, from both schools of thought, really. And it's worth saying, while we do encourage folks to communicate what they'd like to see happen, we have to repeat, we do not suggest any violent emails to anyone, officials or people loosely or directly related to any of the topics discussed here. Every transaction should be respectable. Anything short of that really only hurts the message.
I would recommend listeners go check out at the Jackson Hole News and Guide reporter Billy Arnold. I used to have his job at the News and Guide. He did a story on different people and in organizations that are receiving threats, and some of them are going to crazy places. So someone must have misheard or misgoogled Wyoming Game and Fish Department or Wyoming Game Fish Commission, and they came up with the Wyoming Gaming Commission, and they sent a threat into this entity of the state that
oh my God.
Regulates gambling.
I mean,
it's pretty
wow.
I know. Yeah. Pretty outrageous. And I think I saw a story in the Cowboy State Daily also that was other people with that name, Cody Roberts, are getting threats. I mean, it's just obviously people's anger knows no bounds, and it's not necessarily even being directed toward the right places, even, if that anger and threats were okay, which they're not. It's going toward people and organizations that have nothing to do with the situation, which is just outrageous, frankly.
It's never productive. It's never accomplished anything. I can tell you that right now. Does this, as a journalist, does this story have the characteristics of the kind of story that you think it won't go away quick and it will build momentum and has the potential to inspire genuine policy change? Or is this going to be another internet story that in 2 weeks people forget because some other thing happens?
I don't know. I mean, honestly, I've been really curious about that. It's certainly, what is this? Essentially the start of the third week where this is in the news cycle, based on I don't know how you gauge that, based on page views on our website and emails and whatnot I'm getting about this topic, it is not slowing. I'm sure there'll be tentacles of what happened, reaching out, that are producing headlines for many, many months, because there'll be certainly runs at legislation to address this, that the legislative session's not for 10 months. And so it's just really hard to say. I'd say it's stayed in the spotlight a lot more than a lot longer than I would have anticipated initially, for sure, already. Um, but I don't know. I mean, I interviewed Wayne Pacelli, the former Humane Society executive director, pretty early on in this when this was happening, and he said, I've kind of got a feeling for these kind of things, and he thought this was going to be like of kind of this like the stature of like the Michael Vick dogfighting story or like the Cecil the Lion deal. And I put that in the story. It's what he thought, but like frankly, at that time, I disagreed with him. I thought, there'll be some white hot outrage and it'll fade and life moves on. But here we are. I'm talking to you two full weeks after kind of it started going viral, and it's still seemingly of huge interest to a lot of people.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen via our Instagram, it's been picked up. I mean, the New York Post wrote whether they wrote the story or not wrote the story, but they might have just put the story in their paper. It got on their social media. I think ABC News picked it up. So I mean, yeah, I'm interested to see how the traction is very good right now. I think for those that, ourselves included, that want to see some form of change happen here, and what that change will be ultimately, I don't think we're going to know for quite some time. Like you said, legislative session is not until January, but I know there's a meeting happening just a few days after we speak with you. Can you give us the sense on the ground, just what you've seen or witnessed from folks? It's Sublette County. Is that what it is? Is it Sublette County, Daniel? Okay. Just like what's been, like you said, 2 weeks into this thing, what have you seen when you've actually been able to, I know you're trying your best to get information. Where are people at this point? I saw comments, I think from, is it Sheriff Lair? Is that how you say his name? L-E-H-R, Sheriff Lair. 7,000 emails about this, inundated calls. Where is this small town, this county at this point, 2 weeks into this thing?
Yeah, I can't certainly speak for the typical person in Sublette County. I think that people are tired of the news cycle. And there is certainly a lot of interest in what happened, and there's a lot of readership locally. I can see it. And there's people that live locally that have encouraged me to keep going. But I also know that there's people that are really frustrated with just this never-ending cycle of news around this single incident. And, I understand that on some point there are certainly bad actors in the journalism world. I'm talking British tabloids with this one. And they just, they're repurposing reporting. They're like click-based websites, they're getting ad money from clicks because people are interested in this. And there's no original journalism, and it's just kind of like rage bait for their international audience. And like that's the business model for those platforms. And if I'm a Sublette County resident, and I understand how that's frustrating, and there's not a whole lot of nuance to a lot of these stories. I mean, people don't know Sublette County, so they see that this thing happened here and it's a terrible thing, and obviously it colors their view of the entire community. And is that fair? I mean, I don't think that's fair. And so that it's just I think it's a really challenging situation for the residents, and I understand and to some degree share frustration, and like I question, like, should I keep writing about this constantly, or should I like give it a little bit of a break and write on some other things? I'm starting work on my first non-wolf incident story in over 2 weeks today, and it's nice for me, frankly. So
speaking of that, what's going on at the restaurant or the bar? I mean, have they had a lot of backlash? I mean, I've seen some reviews online for sure, but a lot of those have been taken down. But what's going on there now? Do you know?
I don't. I went to 2 weeks ago today, I went to the Green River Bar for probably an hour, got some cheese curds. They were pretty good, and an iced tea. It was the middle of the workday. Otherwise, I would have had a beer. And uh, I'll be honest, that was the first date was going viral, and the phone was ringing a lot, and there were some people, and I wasn't gonna misrepresent who I was, and so I told people that I was a journalist. I wasn't interviewing people or anything. I just was kind of seeing if people there were willing to talk to me, and it got a little uncomfortable for me. There's some people that made some threats to me, and I'm not going to go into it, but um, uh, yeah, not yeah, yeah, it wasn't terrible, but it was enough to make me want to get out of there. And also and yeah, I'll go back, but I think it's wise to give it some time. And so I haven't been back there in 2 weeks, and I can't really give you any insight onto what's been going on there. I'll say this: I did try to reach the owner, and so I called the bar late last week, and the phone seems to have been taken off the hook. It's not ringing. So I imagine that they've been inundated, and that their solution to that was taking the phone off the hook.
Can you speak to, if you can, again, but there seems to be a fairly I want to say unified, really. I would say 99, 98% in the hunting community condoning the act. Stephen has mentioned a couple of high profile. Stephen Ranella posted on his Instagram about the incident. I think there were a couple other high profile individuals in the hunting community that have obviously come out against this. Does this surprise you at all? That there was such a huge, unified front that this is not okay, from that community. I am not speaking ill of hunters. I'm just wondering if, again, journalistic perspective, personal perspective, that this was fairly unified from the front. There are still individuals, I think, here or there that we've seen that have, I guess, I don't want to say taken pleasure in it, but just look at it and say like, oh, that's what should happen to wolves. But how did you feel as you were seeing this, as this is obviously percolated for the last 2 weeks in the hunting community, that especially?
I mean, I'm pretty plugged into the hunting like media world, and no, I'm not. I wasn't surprised at all. I mean, like this is not, yeah. And I'm a big game hunter. I mean, like it's one of my favorite things to do, and small game hunter. I'm not a predator hunter or wolf hunter. I mean, but even if I was, no, I mean, I don't know anyone. I don't hunt with anyone that would even like think for a second that this was something that is like cool. Or and frankly, if like one of my hunting partners or even someone I knew like gave me that sense that they were into that kind of thing, torturing animals, I'd like be gone. Like that is not like the hunting ethic at all. And so I think that the outrage from that world is like rightly placed and frankly predictable. The only type of comment I've seen that like seems to even sort of excuse the behavior is like the like troll social media comment type, like Canadian wolf, blah, blah, like that kind of bullshit. But like, but I've not had any conversation with anybody or read like an intelligible comment from anybody, even people who like don't like how the media has gone about this, who have like said like this isn't a big deal, like Cody Roberts was in the right, like we got to take a step back here. Like I've not even seen that from anybody.
Yeah. I've seen very, again, it's been very sparse. And like you said, the troll type, yeah, stuff like that. It's interesting because we've seen, and we've heard from a bunch of people that have said this is one of those moments where, again, you have this unification of wildlife advocacy groups, conservation groups, the hunting community that is, coming out at least against this. And you know, do you, as we kind of go down the road here a little bit, you might have said it earlier and I might have forgotten. So apologies for that. Is this something where, and I saw, by the way, the governor created this commission or this group that was going to take a look at the wolf policy and stuff like that. Do you, again, journalism, put your journalism hat on. Is this something we're going to see change happen, or are we just sort of like looking at something like this as a flash in time, and we're going to look back in 10 months and people will say, yeah, remember that crazy thing that happened with the wolf in Wyoming? Where do you honestly sit on that in your journalistic sense?
It's really tough to predict. I mean, there are some very specific tangible things that they could do policy wise that would address a situation like this. So and there have been runs at bills for it before, but explicitly prohibit running over animals with snowmobiles. It's something that is condemned by the overwhelming majority of hunters and an even larger portion of the public at large, I'm sure, would be disgusted by that kind of practice that does happen every single year. I mean, that's just a simple fact. People do that. It's disingenuous to say that it doesn't happen every single year in Wyoming. There are people that live in this community who have made shirts, and hats, chasing fur, like that's a thing. And so the Wyoming legislature will have that option. There will be bills, and the Wyoming legislature is an interesting piece of political machinery, and I am really hesitant. I would think that there would be broad support among lawmakers to prohibit this kind of thing. I also recognize that, the types of advocacy groups, especially ones from out of state that are pushing for this, historically, the Wyoming legislature does not do what they ask. That is just a fact. And so what will be the resolution? I really don't know. But another thing that comes to mind is more explicitly extend animal cruelty law to cover predatory species, or all wildlife. I think that there's other elements of statute that in essence prohibit people from torturing, say, an elk, or a black bear, or a wolf for that matter, in the trophy game area where they're classified as trophy game and not a predator. And so, yeah, that could be another clear, concrete policy step that a bill could address. And it's going to be up to Wyoming legislature whether or not they want to do it, or whether or not they want to, leave it gray and take the chance that someone else will take advantage of the permissiveness of these laws and do something horrific, which is possible, obviously, because we've seen it now. So I don't know, man. I honestly don't have I couldn't tell you there'll be lasting change here, or no way.
Of course,
I couldn't tell you either way. I'll document what happens though.
Yeah, and then we'll have to have you back.
Of course.
Yeah, it's gonna be really interesting to see what happens. I'm really curious. So several articles titled him a hunter, specifically in the headline. And I think particularly the New York Post headline garnered some attention for using the word hunter. And a lot of people were bothered by that association, because like you said, it doesn't align with the majority's hunting ethics and their beliefs about hunting. But you didn't seem to frame him that way in any of your articles, at least in a way that I can recall. I'm wondering if that was a deliberate decision or something you thought about consciously.
I haven't I don't think I've used the term hunter. If I did, it was in conjunction with the reporting on the very little information Game and Fish did release, because they called him a hunter. Now, but I don't know what he was doing. Like, I have no idea what he was doing. Was he out looking for wolves? Was he looking for mountain lions? I mean, at end of February, like I know for a fact this guy is a commercial mountain lion hunting guide. So like that is the time of year where people are running lions. Um, and so like was he out lion hunting and then came across a wolf? Do I consider running down animals and over them and maiming them with snowmobiles hunting? No, I would really hesitate to use that word. I think that's just cruel, like cruelty. I mean, the same thing as fucking driving your car and hitting a turtle on purpose. I mean, it's just needless cruelty. Yeah, that's not hunting. I mean, um, and so yeah, if I ever used the word, it would only have been I think in association with Game and Fish, you calling him a hunter. Uh, and they used Hunter because they didn't name him because they think that he's under the auspices of this statute that protects his identity, which I think is maybe a dubious claim because this guy broke the law and the statute clearly says that legal wolf hunters, and he was not. He, in the process of hunting his wolf, he broke the law. And so I don't quite understand why the statute has any applicability here, but the state is saying that it does. And in the absence of saying Cody Roberts, they said Hunter.
I think for me, lastly, Mike, and just because again, I think, and again, I always thank you for your candor and for your honesty and what you do. It's truly incredible for people to see and know. I think the wear and tear that happens when reporting on the same story for this length of time and knowing the amount of things that you as a journalist are going through in this and trying to acquire information and tell the straight story. What do you honestly believe what will it honestly take for, I don't even want to say for there to be change, for things to at least be reconsidered about how wildlife is managed in the state, if at all? Do you think it's a process that will just continue on as status quo? Or do you believe at some point in your lifetime that there will be a reconsideration of how wildlife is handled, managed, hunted, dealt with in the state of Wyoming?
Yeah, that's a big question. I look around and see, like I said, I'm like well immersed in the hunting media, and so there's a lot of podcasts, a lot of articles about like fish and game commissions in other states. Colorado, Washington State are two big examples that are near Wyoming in the West, where like the non-consumptive, non-hunting, non-angling public is like having more of a seat at the table in management decisions, and is resulting in like change that the hunting community is very cautious of, if not straight like fighting back against. Like they want to preserve their influence in the management of wildlife. Um, I know Wyoming pretty well, and I don't foresee like as an example like a non-hunting or anti-hunting like advocacy type person like getting a seat on the Game and Fish Commission anytime soon. I just don't see that happening. It's a rural state. Um, I People here like gun ownership is extremely high. Hunting and fishing rates are extremely high. I mean, people love their wildlife here, and I think the traditional hunting and fishing and like management regimes are not on the precipice of changing in Wyoming. Not just like next year, 5 years from now, but like arguably for many decades. That is my general sense, that shifts that you see elsewhere in a state like Colorado, where there's a big urban component of the population, majority urban, or Washington, same story, like those shifts are not coming to Wyoming anytime soon. I think that's a fair statement.
Mike, I don't know what else to say other than thank you for the continued reporting, the information, for discussing this with Stephen and I. Again, just give everybody where they can find your work and more update, or other places too where they can, keep abreast of the story. I know it's everywhere, but obviously a shout out to WyoFile and for you, but other places, I guess, where you would direct people to learn more about the story.
Yeah, of course, I work for WyoFile. I think we are the best news reporting organization in the state by a mile. So certainly WyoFile.com. We have all the social media channels on Twitter, X, and Instagram, and I think we're even going on TikTok, although maybe you've never checked that out. Facebook. So any of those places, just Google WyoFile, WYOFILE. And I guess I would encourage, there's media outlets, parachute journalists coming in, writing about this thing that happened. And like, they're going to get, they're going to come in and blast out a story. But if people really want to stay apprised on what's going on, I of course recommend WyoFile, but just like local media in Wyoming that is covering this responsibly. There are other reporters that are paying attention, and I just would encourage people to read. I won't name names or anything, but to read those local journalists who are looking into it and hopefully verifying information and putting out new information about what's going on.
Mike Kosmrl, thank you, man, for everything you're doing. Again, appreciate your integrity, your journalistic sense, and really just bringing this to the forefront in the way you've done in these last 2 weeks and probably beyond. So thank you for taking the time to talk to us. Really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, fellas. Happy to talk about it.
Yeah, you too. How's to everybody out there? We'll talk to you next time. Bye, everybody. Looking for more information about Wolf Connection or the podcast? Please visit our website at wolfconnection.org, where you can donate, sponsor a wolf, or become a volunteer.